So with the invasion of Poland by Germany and the USSR, that's going to prompt some certain actions that are going to take place among the Allies. Because the Allies, Great Britain and France, had promised Poland that if Germany invaded, they would declare war. And they did. So September 1939, Great Britain, France declare war against Germany. So the game is on. FDR reminds everybody that we're neutral. We're neutral, we're staying neutral, nothing's going to change, we're neutral. And the Neutrality Act in 1939 was passed. Now, what that says is that if anybody shows up at our door knocking on it to buy armaments or ships or airplanes or whatever, and they have cash and they can carry it back on their own ship, we will sell it. Germany and France take advantage of this, and they start buying weapons from us and so forth, but only on a cash and carry basis. You have to have the money up front. You can't, this is not a loan. This is not credits. This, cash and carry. Okay, they're going to run out of cash pretty quickly. 1940, Germany's going to attack Denmark and Norway. So Denmark is that little country that hangs off the top of Germany. Norway is one of the Scandinavian countries. They're also going to attack the Netherlands and Belgium. Here we go with neutral Belgium again. Poor Belgium just gets beat up in all these wars. So those countries that sort of surround Germany to the west, the north and the west, Germany goes after. June of 1940, Germany attacks France. This is bad news. They roll into France like a firestorm, and France doesn't last long, okay? They have to give up. All right. Meanwhile, back in the United States, we're still neutral. This is not a big surprise, right? We're still neutral. We do not want part of this war. We start to build up, however, our air fleet, and we start to build a two-ocean navy, because what had happened during the 1920s and early 30s, we had broken down a lot of our military, and because we didn't see a need to keep it up. It was costing us a ton of money. We had the Great Depression upon us. Why are we spending all this money on this defense? Well, now we needed to build it back up again. Okay, our Navy was kind of out of date. It hadn't been really built since World War I, and we also needed an air fleet because we knew in the next war, Air Force was going to be crucial to the success of whatever side wins. September of 1940, Congress passes a conscription law in the United States. This is very interesting because it's the first peacetime draft we've ever had in this country. We've never had a draft and not been at war. Why do you need to draft people if you're not at war? Well, we knew the war was coming. I think every politician kind of knew. It was just a matter of time. It was inevitable. The Havana Conference takes place in 1940 as well, because here's the dilemma. So Germany has rolled into Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Norway, and France. Well, Denmark, the Netherlands, and France all had colonies in Latin America, in those islands. So places like the Virgin Islands and so forth were all colonies of other countries that Germany now controlled. Well, what's the fate of those colonies? Is Germany going to be knocking on the Caribbean's door now, trying to get them? We didn't want that to happen. So the Havana Conference is held. Countries in Latin America and the United States agree to uphold the Monroe Doctrine. No interference from Europe, period. Now, in Britain, Germany's going to turn their attention, since they've already rolled into France, they're going to turn their attention to Britain, and the Battle of Britain is going to take place. This is probably the most devastating battle Britain has ever been engaged in from the air. It's the only time they've really been attacked from the air. There have only been 2 successful invasions of Britain over the entire course of her history, for thousands of years. One was by the Romans, and one was by the Normans. Pretty easy to remember. So, and the monarchs in Britain at this point were still descendants of that Norman conquest. So, the Battle of Britain takes place. It's going to pit the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, against the Royal Air Force, the RAF. Now, every night, these Luftwaffe planes would fly in over the major cities of England, so Liverpool, Manchester, London especially, and they'd fly in and they would just drop bombs all over the place trying to devastate the city, and they do in part. They destroy parts of London that were destroyed during what they call the Blitz. Winston Churchill had underground headquarters at what they call the Cabinet War Rooms, and that's where he held up with his war team to strategize. He even slept in there. If you go there today, you'll see the bed and his, like, part of a stogie and probably some scotch on this bedside table. But they still have the bedroom made up where he slept during this war. It's also said that he used to go out on the roof of the Parliament building and basically just shake his fist at the Luftwaffe as they were coming in, like, come on, you dirty jerks, try and get me. So it had to be humorous to watch. But people had underground bunkers. They had to go to their bunkers and try and be safe from these bombs. And they also were rationing food at that point because they needed the food for the military. So you got a ration book that you had to, like, you could only get so many bread pieces, bread servings a week for your family. You could only get so much milk or so much eggs or whatever. And you had to take your ration book to the grocery store, and that's where it would be doled out, your bread, your milk, your cheese, your eggs, all that stuff. Now, in the United States, here we are, we're watching Britain in its peril, and we don't know what's going to happen. The ambassador to England at the time was Joe Kennedy. He's the father of JFK and Robert Kennedy and Ted Kennedy, blah, 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 blah. So Joe Kennedy's hanging out in England, and he basically writes to FDR, and he says, England's going to have to surrender. Like, it's inevitable. They are done if we don't get involved. We have to get involved. So FDR is really torn. Does he stay with neutrality and keep the United States safe? And the result of that's going to be casting the rest of the world under threat from Hitler, or does he violate that neutrality and does he act as an ally to England? He really has a big dilemma on his hands. And there were people pulling at him to go various directions. So one of the most prominent groups to go to war was this Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. What a name. So this Committee to Defend America was saying basically, we have to help our brothers in England. And they used all kinds of propaganda to help push this message along. They used movies, they used posters, they used radio, whatever, but they really wanted to help our brothers in England, okay? America First Committee was an isolationist committee. They wanted to maintain our neutrality, stay the hell out of that war. America comes first, and darn it, England, they'll fight to the last American over there. They don't care about us. Why are we getting involved? So there were these two forces, these two dynamics that were pulling at FDR and the rest of the politicians in this country about whether or not to go to war. And they would have to answer for that. Now, at this point, Roosevelt and Congress, they don't know what to do to help England or France. So France has set up this like sort of rebel government against the Nazis in Vichy, France. And it would become known as the Vichy government. Never very strong, but still trying to engage in the war. And England and France had basically used up all their credits and their cash with America trying to buy munitions. And that's what we had at that point, was this cash for carry deal. Well, FDR comes up with a new plan called Destroyers for Bases. And what he says is, we have these leftover battleships from World War I. We don't need them anymore because we built a new navy. So these 50 battleships we can give to an ally country, but we want something in return. We're not just going to give them to you free and clear. So what they do is they exchange bases. There were 8 naval bases that England controlled all around the world that they were going to give to America rent-free to run in and out of and use. They were still going to be British, but we were going to be able to use them rent-free for 99 years. We're still under that agreement today, okay? We still are able to use a lot of those bases, those 8 bases. Now, where are those bases? Places like Jamaica, St. Lucia, Newfoundland, all kinds of island areas, Trinidad, all kinds of island nations, particularly in the Caribbean, that we are able to use and utilize these bases. And we give them 50 destroyers. Now, where do those destroyers come from? Well, they come from the United States, and they all had U.S. names going to England. Well, England was going to change those names because those names mean nothing to them. But the agreement, this is interesting, the agreement was if England was going to change the name, they had to be named after towns in England that had a reciprocal town in America. In other words, there had to be the town that existed in England, but also a town name that existed in America. So some of the ships were changed to like the HMS Annapolis, or the HMS Salisbury, or the HMS Roxborough, those kinds of things. But towns that existed in America, also in England, that's what the ships could be named after, and they came up with 50 names. So Next, 1940. In 1940, we have a presidential election, of course, because every 4 years we seem to have one of these. So in 1940, the Democrats are going to stick with FDR because he's been consistent. Now, this will be his third election. It's a complete violation of the trend that George Washington started. But at this point, FDR believes that, and the Democrats believe, that consistency is necessary, particularly because it looks like we're going to war. So they stick with FDR. The Republicans, they horse around. They can't decide what they're going to do. They knew they had to put up somebody strong against FDR, but who's it going to be? So three names emerge. One is the senator from Ohio, Robert Taft, who's the son of former President Taft. He was a pretty strong contender. And Thomas Dewey from New York, he was this well-known educator. Wasn't really known for his politics, but he was a well-known educator. So it was these two, and then this guy named Wendell Willkie. Now, Wendell Willkie had some real issues with, he was a politician, but he had some real issues with FDR's plan to get us out of the Great Depression, that New Deal. He didn't like it. So that's what he was really vocal about, was that the New Deal sucked. He doesn't win, because we never had a President Willkie. So FDR wins again. He wins by about 5 million popular votes. So the election went pretty well for him. No big deal. The Lend-Lease Agreement is going to be passed during Roosevelt's next administration. What the problem was the Allies had no money left. Great Britain and France, no money. So the United States says, okay, we'll lend them munitions and weapons. And we'll get the money later. Because, and this is the premise that FDR presents to Congress, if your neighbor's house was on fire, wouldn't you lend them a water hose to help put it out? So he basically said that Europe is on fire, and we have to help the Allies. So we have to lend them a water hose. This was in the form of guns and bombs and grenades and tanks and stuff. And this plan was appreciated because it helped to keep us out of war still. It's another way for us to extend help to the people we wanted to help, but we weren't in the war. We didn't have any boots on the ground, okay? By March of 1941, we had approved $50 billion worth of munitions to the Allies. That was a huge number in 1941. So this was really coming to be. The problem with this is that it's an economic declaration of war. What we basically told Hitler is, yeah, you can't buy anything from us. You can't get anything from us. We're helping the Allies, but we're not officially at war with you, but we might as well be. Okay? This was an economic declaration of war, and Hitler saw it as such.